Hey, it's Soul, and this is the guide to leatherworking in Midnight. Here we'll cover leveling up and specialization paths. Then we'll cover cooldown and mastery crafting along with a few builds, then highlight some cool things leatherworking has to offer. This is an intermediate guide that assumes you've got some experience with professions over the past couple years. Use the navigation to get you where you want to go. Please like this video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, and catch me where I'm live. A few things to point out, and of course you can skip this if you've heard it before because I'm going to repeat it for just about every profession. Consumable goods and reagents now only have 2 quality ranks. This matters a little bit for gear crafters, but when it comes to things like reagents and armor kits, it's a pretty big deal that creates a distinction between what I call a cooldown crafter versus a master crafter of these items. And I gotta explain those terms too. A cooldown crafter doesn't rely on high-level materials, tools, levels, or knowledge points beyond what's needed to learn recipes. Instead, they focus on using the concentration stat to raise the quality of an item to the next highest rank. In Midnight, with only 2 ranks, max quality is just 1 step away. Virtually all professions can apply this philosophy to create crafting characters who basically use concentration to make max quality consumables and reagents when enough is available, thus using concentration as like a daily-ish cooldown mechanic. As soon as leatherworkers learn the recipes, they can immediately spend their concentration to make useful items like armor kits and reagents for epic gear, though they can only make a handful every few days. A player with this philosophy sees their characters more or less as tools, a means to an end, and so on, and will primarily do their business in the auction house. I'm speculating here, but I anticipate cooldown crafters to be pretty popular, as they don't even need high-quality materials to make top-quality goods. There might be a drawback though, as this could actually impact the supply of materials, which might narrow the price differences in quality. We also need to consider the mid to long term of this kind of approach. Like, what will the competition be like between single-player characters and those who might roll numerous alts slamming their cooldowns? How many players will actually use this many alts, and how will all this mix in with the region auction house? We'll have to wait and see. On the other hand, master crafters depend on building up levels and knowledge points to eventually mass-produce high-quality items and gear without limits, which involves steady progression, with all the weekly grinding and activities involved, especially in a case like leatherworking where the vast majority of recipes are armor crafts. This sort of development also falls under the philosophy of being a completionist who has fully developed their character. And that's cool. This isn't about right or wrong gameplay. You can play the game however you like, but this guide will make distinctions so you can come up with your own strategy without getting yourself too confused with everything that's needed to get there. All the familiar trappings have returned, from specializations to knowledge points to patron orders and concentration. A number of recipes are purchased with Artisan's Moxie, earned from skill-ups, gaining knowledge, and fulfilling patron orders. Some are discovered or dropped, and you can mouse over the info box on the recipe to find out how to get it. Moxie, by the way, replaces Artisan's Acuity from the War Within. Moxie is also specific to a given profession like leatherworking, so unlike Dragonflight and the War Within, you won't be able to jump multiple professions to consolidate a bunch of Moxie to then dump into a single profession. Since Dragonflight, leatherworking has never been very difficult to level up, at least up to a certain point, and even then, the flexibility of having 2 armor types worth of recipes, it's super helpful. Midnight leatherworking is no different, allowing you to shoot up to around level 60 easily, especially if you have a character that does skinning. There are still quite a few different parts to collect, making it a good idea to have a skinning alt or a friend who's willing to share. The remaining levels will be found through a mix of crafting orders from players and NPC patrons, and new recipe crafts and bonuses from the likes of the Darkmoon Fair. For tools, resourcefulness is always good for patron orders and the relatively easy rewards you get from them as long as you keep a minimum stock of materials around. The payoff doesn't seem to be great early in an expansion when materials are better off sold to whales, but keeping that minimum lets you steadily complete orders as they come in, which bring in other important resources like knowledge points, as well as finishing reagents and augment runes which can be turned for a profit to maintain that minimum stock. The cooldown crafting approach for leatherworking is a bit weaker than other professions, but a lot of folks looking for armor to be made will just pick up high-quality reagents for their armor crafts. That's where you can come in with your army of cooldown crafters to pump these out. Hopefully a good multi-craft stat will make a difference. Let's go over specializations, which have had a few changes since the War Within. Learned Leatherworker is where you pick up secondary stats like ingenuity, resourcefulness, and multicraft, and a stat I've mentioned a few times in other guides, reducing concentration cost. There's another stat that increases the refund given when an ingenuity proc happens. Regarding cooldown crafting, personally I think just adding another profession alt and spending points on multi-craft is far more efficient and worth the material cost of leveling them up. But eventually, investing into the reduced cost of concentration, that should be helpful in the long run. The leather and armor specializations have a slight change that should help budding crafters. Upon learning the specializations at all, you also learn how to use all the optional reagents, to edit stats, add item level, and so on. This is great for patron orders, which tend to include orders asking for some of these optional reagents that we don't get access to unless we were to focus hard into those trees. That's how it was in previous expansions. The earlier unlock means greater accessibility sooner. It also provides an opportunity for crafters to spec wide and pick up on making adventure level epics for themselves or for others to help kickstart early season gearing. It won't be a perfect craft, as in concentration will be used most likely, it's just neat the greater accessibility is there. Finally, Flawless Forts is where we can spec into profession equipment on one side, and all the items cooldown crafters will be interested on the other side. This includes reagents to make epic gear, optional reagents, and armor kits. Since we're on this tree, let's talk up some cooldown crafting ideas. There are 2 armor kits that are bound to move on a regular basis, but it'll also be pretty competitive. One armor kit recipe is bought with Moxie and Void Light Marl. It's a resource earned from completing outdoor content. The other is learned from specializations into this tree, but you don't need to go very far down unless you also want to reduce concentration costs. Couple this with a stat boost from Learned Leatherworker for a bit more staying power for each of your alts. On the other hand though, you can be a lazy butt and just roll more alts, increasing your cooldown crafting output that way. Just next door to armor kits are basic and optional reagents. Now, in my opinion, basic reagents are the best play overall because, as mentioned, folks who want armor crafted for them, they're going to buy up high quality reagents on a pretty regular basis, and that's where you can come in with your alt army. Optional reagents, though, it's kind of a toss-up. Like, maybe they're good, maybe someone with a sim will say, oh, they're bad, and then, well, there goes the momentum. Master crafters have 3 basic choices: leather, mail, or profession accessories. Accessory making for leatherworkers, it's easy to get into, but it's also involved as they need a lot of moxie to buy up all these recipes. It's also a gamble because folks will usually buy profession tools first for the bigger bonuses. At this current stage of the beta though, crafting rare quality tools or accessories doesn't ask for any super exotic materials, but we'll see if this changes. From how it looks on the beta though, I would suggest prioritizing buying up recipes to make the skinning accessories since they can make both of them, and herbalism, and then knock out the others as those are a bit less in demand. As for armor crafting, at this early stage it's probably a good idea to spec wide to cover patron orders unless you're totally dead set on being a master crafter of like certain slots that are most likely to be used, like the wrist, the boots, or maybe the belt. There's a number of embellished gear options for leatherworkers though, and if those end up being highly popular, then you're racing for the early traffic. And while that's fresh in our mind, let's get to the cool things leatherworking can make, starting with the embellished gear. How convenient. Starting with leather, there's a belt that poisons an enemy and kind of spreads to others. A pair of boots spawns a power-up that you'll need to pick up for a throughput boost. And there are 3 other pieces of gear where 2 activate a set bonus. And from the read of it, it seems like a throughput buff. Under mail, there's a wrist that gives a stacking haste buff. There are gloves that deal a direct damage proc, and like leather, there's another 3 pieces of gear to activate a set bonus that gives a random secondary stat. While optional reagents are hard to gauge ahead of balance tuning, let's see what leatherworking's got. The Primal Spore Binding seems to be a random proc for either damage or healing. The Devouring Banding seems to be a bit more direct damage, including a buff for yourself. Finally, the Blessed Pango Charm applies versatility to a target, and I hope that it automatically targets you if there's no one else around. Drums are back in a similar fashion as previous expansions, so have at it and good luck with the multi-craft procs. And the decor offered here is strong with a mostly hair and hair theme that's deeply rooted. Get it? It's rude and the decor anyway. What stands out to me is actually the table here. I like the texture up top, and I can see a few room designs where this would be embiggened and used as like a wall cover. And that's the guide. Please like this video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.